Here we go. Okay, am I screen? Welcome to the League of Women Voter Lacrosse Area's 2021 January's No Lunch and Learn. I'm Mary Nugent, Lacrosse League's president. Last week's breach on the Capitol was unprecedented. Our nation was shaken. League of Women Voters US took the unprecedented step of issuing a statement calling for the immediate removal and impeachment of President Donald J. Trump. The complete statement can be read on our website. In addition, yesterday, League of Women Voters US issued a letter asking leagues for their own safety to not participate in any gatherings from now until the inauguration. The FBI has issued a warning of the possibility of nationwide violence. Again, unprecedented. For months, our election laws and processes were being questioned. It is clear many Americans do not understand or trust our current election processes. Because of this, I cannot think of a better time to explore a different, nonpartisan look at elections. We are fortunate to have Sarah Eskridge, Executive Director of Democracy Found, to offer a way to invigorate our democracy through Final Five voting. In addition, Ellen France will give us an update on current judicial happenings, and Robin Schmidt will show you another important aspect of our website. A new year brings new challenges and opportunities for the League to make a difference. Please consider volunteering for one of our standing committees since, yes, it is an election year. Once again, we are involved in Vote 411, gathering information from local candidates and making it available on that website. We can always use more people who are willing to contact candidates. We are also expecting to be involved in several forums, mayoral and others. We're expecting these to be virtual, but we're still going to be looking for timers, so please consider volunteering. As mentioned last month, we have the possibility of some new projects for which we're looking for interested people to help with. One is the Oral History Project of lifetime members. The second is a study of ranked choice voting. And the third is working with the River Alliance of Wisconsin on clean water referendums. And finally, we're looking for people who are interested in a state infrastructure, it's hard to say it, infrastructure project. If you would like to be part of any of these new projects or our standing committees, especially Vote 411, please contact us through our website. Finally, be checking your email this month for a short membership survey that League of Women Voters Wisconsin has put out. Your replies will help determine the direction of the league. It's very short and very easy to complete. That'll be coming out very soon, probably the end of this week. If you have any questions on that, please contact our Gmail account, and we're very happy to help you with it. Okay, now let's get on with today's outstanding program. As always, this webinar will be recorded and available on our website and on our YouTube channel. The League is proud to be nonpartisan, neither supporting nor opposing candidates or political parties at any level of government, but always working on vital issues of concern to members and the public. I'd now like to introduce you to Robin Schmidt, our Vice President, for some how-to explanations.
Thanks, Mary. I'm going to share my screen and hold on here. Just 1 second. Sorry about that. Now we got it. All right. Sorry. Okay. Can you guys see this? Okay, thank you. So last time we talked a little bit about our new website and how to log in as a member. And today I'd like to just show you one of the features that we have, and I'm going to go ahead and log in. And what I'd like to show you is how to access documents. And so this is a new feature of our website. So if you log in and go to About Us and scroll down to the Document tab, you will see a listing of the documents that are being populated onto our website. And you might see a shorter version of it that looks like this when it's collapsed, and you can see the main folders that we have put our documents into. Or you can hit the expand all and see all of the various folders and subfolders that are available to host our documents. I want to point out, first of all, that we do have a Club Express tutorial that is on the very first item here that you can look at if you can't remember how to log in to Club Express. That you can access, anyone from the public can access that. You don't have to be logged in to access that. I also want to point out, for example, you can see in the parentheses the number of documents that are within a subfolder. So you see the League of Women Voters Lacrosse Area Policies, and there's a number 3. And if I click on that, I will see 2 policies that are listed there as PDFs that you can then download and look at. And then when you're done with them, you just exit out. But there's 3 in the parentheses. There's 1 document that's only available for administrators. So don't be concerned if you see documents that don't match up the number that are showing up in the parentheses, because some of them are really for internal use. And but it's nice that we now have the capacity to put a number of our documents out here for anyone to see. So so basically that's the summary of what we have in our documents. And we welcome you to look for documents. And if there's something that you feel you'd like to be able to see and it's not listed there, just send us a note in the Contact Us page, which is also in the About Us, and let us know what you'd like to see. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop my share. And I think that I'm going to go ahead and spotlight Ellen, who's going to give us an update on legislative activities. So let's add Ellen to the spotlight here.
Okay, thank you, Robin. I just wanted to mention a couple of things. As most of you know, I'm sure, the flurry of post-election litigation brought by Trump and his allies is pretty much gone now. The last thing that happened, you may recall that a legislature, I think from Texas and Arizona electors, brought a lawsuit against Vice President Pence to require him to take action that the Constitution doesn't let him take. But nonetheless, that was finally, it was dismissed here in Wisconsin. They did file an appeal with the United States Supreme Court, and on January 7th, just by order, there was no opinion, the Supreme Court denied the application for interim relief. I haven't read the material, but I'm guessing the interim relief would have been requiring Pence to do something now or before last week, if possible, to allow him to decide what votes count and what votes don't. So that is gone. There probably still is the basic lawsuit that the Supreme Court will have to do something with, but at least for now, certainly nothing's going to happen, and I suspect nothing ever will happen of any substance. I still haven't seen a decision on the purge case yet. You may recall our Wisconsin Supreme Court did not issue a ruling on that prior to the election. This is the one about whether voters on the electoral rolls should be purged because perhaps they moved and they're not at that address or what have you. So that's still out there and will be decided at some point. And finally, for those of you who were following the census, you may recall that the Trump administration wanted to exclude undocumented people from the apportionment base. In other words, we don't count those people when we decide how many congressional districts they're going to be in any given state. A number of states sued to prevent that going into effect, and it went up to the United States Supreme Court, who I think in November decided that this wasn't ready for court review because the administration really didn't know how many people might be in that group and how they'd identify who the undocumented people were that make up the base. And so they said, we're not going to do anything with it now. You have to go back to the trial court. The upshot is that the census information, which was to be reported out on December 31st, the census people did not meet that deadline. They're working on processing the data, and the longer it takes, the more likely that whenever the apportionment numbers are put together, it's going to occur under Biden's administration, not under Trump. So I think that likely is going to come to nothing because I don't think there's any will in the Biden administration not to count undocumented individuals, given that the Constitution talks about people and where they reside is not talk about whether you are a documented person or not. So that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. I wanted to point out that I will be monitoring questions and answers, so I don't see any questions for you at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to Mary to introduce our speaker.
Very pleased to introduce Sarah Eskerich. She is the Executive Director of Democracy Found, a Wisconsin-based nonpartisan initiative committed to revitalizing democracy. Sarah previously served on the Madison Common Council and currently serves as a Madison Metropolitan Sewerage District Commissioner. Her career includes roles in the public and private sectors, including at Deloitte Consulting, the University of Wisconsin Population Health Institute, Kids Forward, the Wisconsin Alliance for Women's Health, and City Council President Michael P. Ross's campaign and office at the City of Boston. Sarah is a graduate of the University of Wisconsin-Madison and holds a Master's of Public Affairs from the Robert M. La Follette School and Master's of Public Health from the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health. So thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you all for being with us today, and thank you to anyone who's watching this recording. It's lovely to be with you. As I was joking with Pam as we were working to set this up, I would much rather be with you in person in La Crosse. I love La Crosse, and it's always fun to be able to come up and talk with people there because I get to then do fun La Crosse things while I'm there. But this will do. So I'm going to also share my screen with you all. So before I get started on the crux of our presentation today, I just want to thank the League of Women Voters and you all for the work that you do and speak to how much it resonates. So the mission, right? Empowering voters and defending our democracy. That is exactly what we are working to do at Democracy Found. So what better partners to share this work with? And then on a more personal level, the value of believing in the power of women to create a more perfect democracy resonates so much with me personally. It was really my mother who instilled my belief in democracy and participation and representative government and our role in that. And women have been leaders in that space for so many years. So it's no surprise that women will continue to lead in our work of creating a more perfect union and defending our democracy. So my background, as you briefly heard from Mary, is much more in the realm of policy work, particularly in healthcare and in local politics. But have been involved in partisan politics for years. And it was really this work that I'll speak about today that was created by Catherine Gale, a business leader here in Wisconsin, on politics as an industry that was a light bulb moment for me. It was very much the time where I saw all of these different parts of my life from a policy and politics perspective coming together to be so well defined at the root cause of what's going wrong and what's not serving us well. So I just wanted to flash the book here on the screen for a minute to say that it was a light bulb moment for me. It was also a light bulb moment for Catherine's co-chair in Wisconsin, Austin Ramirez, who's another business leader in our state, to say, all right, Catherine, let's put our money where our mouth is. You're out talking about this theory and this analysis, and ultimately what you're saying is that we need to change the way that we run elections at a state level. So we're here in Wisconsin, let's get this done in our home state of Wisconsin. So today I'm not going to do too much of the theory and background because I can just recommend this book to you. And if you're interested in learning more, Mary will share, but there is going to be a book discussion with the League of Women Voters of Dane County on the 25th that you're all welcome to join. And I'm also happy to do a later book discussion with you all in La Crosse or others if that's too quick to get a book and read it in the next couple 10, 15 days. So I'm going to really focus on the important thing, which is how do we make things better? How do we make our political system work for us as citizens? And it really starts with elections, and that will come as no surprise to you all, the League of Women Voters. So let me flash up here again, a Venn diagram that really strikes a chord based on my own personal experience in politics. And I think it'll resonate with you all as well, which is to say that this is a Venn diagram, and you'll see a non-intersecting Venn diagram, importantly, because there's virtually no intersection right now between Congress acting in the public interest and the likelihood of members of Congress getting reelected. So in other words, if our elected representatives do their jobs the way that we want them to and need them to, they're likely to lose those jobs. And that's crazy design. So fortunately, that's what we can fix. And the answer to fixing it lies in understanding the design of the industry. Because politics itself is not some sort of sacrosanct institution that's preordained by our founding fathers in our Constitution. It's not the same. Politics is not the same as our system of government or our governmental institutions. Politics is an industry that's been optimized and fine-tuned over time by the players in the industry itself. And understanding that the rules that were created in this industry, in this system of politics, were created by and for these players is key to understanding both how they work and that we have leverage to change them to get better results. So put it differently, I think this will resonate, that as always is the case in life, the rules of the game affect the way both the game is played and the results of that game. And the results of the game in politics is unhealthy competition, both unhealthy competition in elections and unhealthy competition in legislating. And the result of unhealthy competition is always, in any industry, that customers are not well served. So the actors in the politics industry, while they're thriving, us, the American public, we've simply never been more dissatisfied. And this dysfunction, it endures across election cycles and across administrations because it's systemic. The rules of the game in politics make prisoners of even our own elected representatives, our own senators and congresspeople, because their only option is lockstep allegiance to their side of this divide. So what do we do about it, right? How do we change these rules to free up our Congress and make competition in politics a win-win, make it serve our interest as the public? And that is why we have to focus on the rules, changing the rules. And so importantly, right, which rules? What do we need to change? And I think this is where the work of Democracy Found is really interesting, because it's not the rules that we often think of. We often think of gerrymandering, of the Electoral College, of no term limits, of even money in politics. And it's not those things, I will argue to you today, as crazy as that might seem. Because if you look at politics through a competition lens, through this politics industry theory that Catherine Gale created, it identifies two rules that are both our biggest obstacles and our biggest opportunities that are really hidden in plain sight. So let me talk about them real quickly, because we don't talk about them often enough. The first is our party primary. And I think this will resonate with you all as the league, because you know that most elections are really decided in the primary, where candidates are pulled further to the right and further to the left than voters as a whole really want. And in 80% of our races for Congress, the winners are decided in that primary. So that's a problem in campaigns and in elections. But that problem is even worse because it extends, that influence of party primaries extends to governing. Party primaries are the biggest structural contributor to the gridlock and horrible results that we get from Washington, D.C. Because if you take a moment and imagine yourself as a federal elected official, member of Congress, it's not just what you have to say to get elected. It's that once you're in office and you're presented with some sort of opportunity to consider landmark legislation, consider bipartisan, common sense, compromise legislation that would actually be a solution to one of our most pressing problems as a country. Could be anything: debt, immigration, healthcare, infrastructure, take your pick. The most operative questions that you have to ask yourself might be, is this a good idea? Is this the right policy for our country? Or even, is this what the majority of my constituents would want me to vote for? But really, it's none of those. Because the question you have to ask yourself is, will I make it back through a party primary if I vote for this? And if the answer to that question is no, which it virtually always is on the big, most important issues, then the previous questions, those really important questions, are fundamentally irrelevant, because the rational incentive to get reelected dictates that you vote no. And if you vote yes, you're going to have a party primary challenger, because party primaries create this essentially eye of the needle problem through which no problem-solving politician can pass. So that's one of the major reasons that we don't get results in our democracy. The other reason that we don't get results is because there's no accountability for not getting results. There's no accountability because we only have two choices. So this gets to the second problem, because in any other industry, if we're thinking about politics as an industry that's as big and as thriving and frankly as lucrative as politics, with the degree of customer dissatisfaction we have in politics, right? Congress's approval rating never goes above 20%. Some entrepreneur would see it as a phenomenal business opportunity to come into this market with only two players and create a new competitor that would respond to what customers want. But that doesn't happen in politics because there are these astronomically high barriers to entry. And the biggest structural barrier to entry is how we vote, specifically this system of plurality voting. And again, it's not something we think about very often because it's kind of always been that way. When our country was young, there were very, very few examples of successful and enduring democracies. They just didn't exist yet. So our leaders at the time copied the only electoral system that they were familiar with and in existence, which was Britain's countryside elections, these district elections that declared the winner to be the person with the most votes but not necessarily a majority of votes. In other words, in order to win, you only had to gain a plurality, not a true majority. So plurality voting means that in any race where you have more than 2 candidates, the winner can have far less than a majority of support. So for example, think about a competitive 3-way race. A winner could win that 3-way race with 34% of the vote, meaning that 66% of the voters actually preferred someone else. So fundamentally, again, we don't think about this, but plurality voting definitely doesn't seem fair or representative. But even more importantly, I want to argue to you today is that influence, that negative effect of plurality voting is that it eliminates any new competition to the duopoly, because plurality voting makes it so that we have these spoiler and wasted vote effects. And again, you all know how this goes because we hear it all the time, which is to say, sometimes you don't vote for the candidate that you really want because you're afraid that you'll either be wasting your vote, or even worse, your vote will help elect the person that you like the least. And even more often than having that in real life, of having a spoiled election or a wasted vote candidate, is that problem, that phenomena of spoilers and wasted votes keeps people from running in the first place, because it's not rational to run. Why would you get in the race if you're just going to be a spoiler, if you're just going to be a wasted vote? So it leaves us with this polarized 2-party competition in our current system. And it doesn't matter, if you actually like third-party or independent candidates, or even really if you want inter-party competition or not, or think that we already are doing just fine with the candidates that we have. I think we can all still kind of pause and understand that there's something fundamentally wrong with a system where having more passionate and talented competitors is bad. And if you think about it, politics is one of the only industries where we are regularly told as customers in the industry that we should have less competition, that less competition is better for us as the customers. And that shouldn't be, and it doesn't have to be, but it is because of this rule of plurality voting. So the elections innovation that we're talking about today, that we're working on at Democracy Found, is called Final 5 voting. And it solves both of these structural problems in how we vote, one in the primary and one in the general election. So first, what you have to do is get rid of this system of broken party primaries. So we changed to a system that we call a top 5 primary. It's essentially that you go in and there's one ballot. Instead of having to pick if you're going to vote in the Republican column or the Democratic column, you vote for your favorite candidate regardless of their party affiliation. And the top 5 finishers automatically, out of that primary, advance to the general election. So the top 5 primary, it eliminates that eye of the needle problem of party primaries and allows legislators significantly more power and leeway and freedom to legislate in the public interest. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we get rid of this system of plurality voting in the general election. We move to a system of instant runoff. Think of it as something like this. So you go in and on your ballot, you say, all right, I definitely know who my favorite is. It's easy. I would love for that person to win. And the next person is all right. And then I guess if I have to, and then you definitely know who your last favorite is, right? You can tell us who over your dead body you would like to win. That's essentially how it works. But how does it look in reality? In reality, on a ballot, we use a ranked choice voting ballot where you can vote for your favorite candidate. I can vote for the Packers, just like I did in the primary, and I can stop there and my vote will count, just like it does today. But if I want to, I can also tell you that full range of preference. That it's simple. It's really quite simple. And what happens is once the polls close, you count up all the first place votes. And if someone gets over 50%, a true majority, then the election is over and that candidate, they win. But if the leader falls short of 50%, technology enables instant runoff voting, where the last place candidate is automatically eliminated. And if I voted for that candidate who's now out of the race, my vote gets transferred to my next choice. The votes are counted again, and the process continues until you have a majority winner. As the name implies, right, it's basically a series of runoff elections, but instead of having to keep coming back for the next election, you just cast all your votes at once. So instant runoffs ensure that we always elect the candidate that has the broadest appeal to the most voters. But the most important benefit of instant runoffs, if we're actually concerned about getting results in our system again, is that instant runoff eliminates that barrier to new competition. It eliminates the spoiler argument, it eliminates the wasted vote argument, and it leads to healthy competition to solve problems and actually deliver results to real people in their lives. So let's go back to that original Venn diagram, right? And imagine under this new system of final five voting, where politicians are now incented to solve problems. They're incented to do what we as a country need them to do. Because now, when they, right, you're the same congressman, put yourself back into that mind game where you're the congressman and you're looking at that bipartisan landmark legislation about one of our biggest challenges as a country, you can now vote yes on that. Because you can say to yourself, well, under that old system, I definitely wouldn't have made it out of my party primary if I voted for this. But under the new system, I can definitely make it through the primary because I'll be in the top 5. I'm a good congressman. I do what my constituents want me to do. I'm responsive. I'm the incumbent, right? And then in the general election, I get to appeal to that broad electorate. I can get enough first and second, and maybe even third place votes to create a coalition and craft a win. So this system, it really does realign incentives for elected officials, because if we implement together the top 5 primary and instant runoffs in the general, we get this system that incentivizes results and accountability for whether or not we're getting results. It's exciting. I'm obviously excited about it because results are achievable with this system in a matter of years and not decades as we build momentum. Article 1 of the Constitution delegates almost everything about congressional elections to states. So each state can change the rules for how we run our federal elections individually. So we don't even need all 50 states to make this change. We don't need federal legislators to make this change, because imagine, even if 5 states changed the way they sent their delegation to Washington, D.C., they're elected now under this new incentive structure of final 5 voting, we'd automatically have 10 US senators and approximately 50, depending on the states, representatives who could create this new fulcrum of problem solvers who could take action. They could buck partisan strangleholds on governing and actually get things done. It's incredibly powerful, and it's a fantastic way to create a system that can provide results for our country as a whole. That's what's exciting about political innovation. So it's powerful, right? It's achievable because we can do it at the state by state level. And in Wisconsin, what that means is that we have to do it by passing state legislation. So let me tell you a little bit about what we're doing here in Wisconsin to get that done. It's more doable, I would argue, than you think, because 1, we're asking our state legislators to change the rules for Congress. And almost everybody knows that Congress is broken across the whole political spectrum. And it's not just theory, it's happening. Our legislators are already starting to take the lead. In Wisconsin, we have a bipartisan set of legislative co-authors in the state Senate and in the state assembly who are working in a cross-partisan way to build the momentum and introduce this bill in Wisconsin. So this op-ed that I'm just flashing on the screen right now is on our website. Check it out. Our 2 lead authors wrote an op-ed back in this spring where they said, look, we get to make this change. It is our responsibility as state legislators to clean up Washington, D.C. Our congressman from Green Bay, Congressman Mike Gallagher, is a strong proponent of Final 5 voting. He talks about it as a way that would actually allow him to legislate in the public interest, which is why he got into Congress in the first place. So we're introducing this legislation either later this month or early next month. And we're in a position to do it in Wisconsin because we have strong bipartisan support with business and community leaders in our state. There's a huge number of names and people on the screen in front of you. This is just a snippet from our website. But that's what's so powerful about this, is that it's real Wisconsinites who are coming together to say, we don't agree necessarily on the policy solution or on the candidate that should get elected, but we agree that we should have a system of government that works, that's accountable, and that produces results. So our big ask right now is spread the word and join us. Sign up on our website as a supporter if you think this is interesting and you want to be involved, but also help us spread the word, particularly in nonpartisan and non-political venues like this one. It is a time where people are so frustrated by politics. And so a lot of Wisconsinites have very rationally checked out, right? They've disengaged in politics because they feel like there's nothing that they can do to make a difference. And so our perspective at Democracy Found is that once you understand these structural issues, these rules that are getting in the way of real governing, you have power because you see that you can change them. We have that power to fix the way our democracy is operating. So it's only going to happen, one person, one conversation, one relationship at a time. And I'm so glad that I've been able today to preview this for you all. And I look forward to more conversations moving forward. I'm happy to answer any questions today or to have anyone follow up with me if you're interested in both getting involved and helping us to spread the word about the exciting prospects for Final Five voting in Wisconsin. Let me pause there and see if we've got any questions.
Sarah, this is Robin. Say there's a question. Can you just go back to that slide that had you vote for your first, second, third, fourth, and then like how that process works again? Because I'm not sure. I think hearing it one more time might be helpful.
Absolutely. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pull up a real live election scenario, because if we were in person, what I would do is I would have each of you do it, right? Try this and vote in this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share on my screen here an example from an election where we did do this in person in Milwaukee, the Greater Milwaukee Committee last spring. So in this election scenario, we use sports teams, as I did before, and we say, basically, a top five primary is just all of the candidates on one ballot. So we all experience this. I'll go into some details with you all because you're election aficionados at the League of Women Voters. It's basically like a spring election in that everybody's on one ballot, right? Like our municipal elections. But unlike our municipal elections, people can still have a partisan affiliation after their name. So we're not asking candidates in the partisan primary to give up party affiliation. We're just saying that you should be able, Robin, to say that in one race you want to vote for the Republican in the primary, and in the other race you want to vote for a Democrat in the primary. You should be able to vote for the candidate that you like the most, regardless of their party affiliation. So in this pretend example, I'm going to vote for the Green Bay Packers. And what you see out of this primary that we held was that there's a smattering of results, but it's pretty clear who the top five finishers are. The top five, think of it as a narrowing mechanism to getting to the five candidates that are the most representative of the district. And those five candidates are the ones who make it onto the ballot in the general election. So in the general election, again, this was in Milwaukee, so no surprise, 3 of the 5 candidates happened to be Milwaukee party candidates, Milwaukee sports teams. And people get to go through and vote for their favorite. So again, I voted for the Packers in the primary, so I'm going to vote for them again in the general election. And like I said, you can stop here. Just like in our current elections, your vote matters just as much if you vote for one or if you vote for your full 5 preferences. You get to determine where you want your votes to go. So let's imagine that I know who my second, third, fourth, and last place choices are. So that's my ballots mattering. And the results get calculated as follows. All the first place votes gets tallied. And as I mentioned, if someone had over 50% with first place votes, they would win. The election would be over if they crossed that 50% line. But you'll see here in this particular election, it was pretty competitive between the Bucks, the Brewers, and the Packers, and no one had over 50% with first place votes alone. So here are the first place votes just laid out a little bit differently so you can see for the calculations. So in this election, because no one had over 50% with first place votes, we drop the lowest place candidate. So the forward are now out of the race. And anyone who had the forward as their first place vote has the opportunity to have their second place vote counted. So you'll see in this election that actually everyone who voted for the forward happened to vote for the Brewers as their second place vote. That continues where you drop the lowest place candidate and everybody who voted for them has the opportunity to have that second or third, their next favorite candidate counted. The votes get redistributed, right? Until one candidate crosses that threshold of 50%. And so what that signifies is that even though I happened to prefer the Packers from the very beginning, but some people didn't, right? Some of them preferred the Bucks or the Brewer, right? Like some people preferred a different candidate, but they were okay with the Packers. The Packers was the candidate that they could broadly say, all right, I'd be all right with them representing me. They have the broadest support amongst the electorate as a whole. And so that series of, we all know too much about runoffs now after Georgia, right? But basically what it is it's just allowing that process of runoffs with the theory that in order to get to a winner who has over 50% is of value, which I believe it is. But doing that much more efficiently because everybody got to cast all their votes at once. That's what an instant runoff election does. And like I said, it changes the calculus in governing because it makes it so that you have a lot more flexibility because you didn't have that party primary and you get to think about what the broad segment of your electorate would want you to do in governing. Let me stop sharing here. But the other thing that, we are all about results in governing at Democracy Found. That's our whole motivation to do this, is to change that calculus that currently just gives us gridlock and partisan stagnation in DC, should change that. But it also has some other ancillary benefits of changing the way our elections operate. Because in our elections, if you were to run an election via an instant runoff, as a candidate, I have no incentive to just malign anyone who wants to vote for Robin, because I actually maybe want Robin's voters to vote for me second. So I have an incentive to talk about how we are different, perhaps, on some issues, but I'm not going to totally trash you because I want those voters, your voters, to vote for me second. So it changes the tenor of campaigns. It also changes who throws their name into campaigns. That idea that more competition can be good for governing and good for representation, super important. And we've actually seen in places that have implemented the instant runoff part of this Final Five solution that more women and more people of color have gotten elected under these systems because of how they change representation and how they change campaigns. So there are a lot of benefits to this idea of an instant runoff, otherwise called ranked choice voting, that will be, I believe, really of value to our democracy.
That's really helpful. All right, so I have a couple of comments and questions. The first question is, these sound like good changes. When you talk with knowledgeable people who are not in favor of your proposals, what are the concerns that they express?
Great question. It usually the concern is usually around the second piece, the instant runoff or ranked choice voting component of the changes. That's usually where the concern or questions come in. And it's usually from a perspective of that's too complicated. Voters will never be able to figure out how to express their full range of preference, and therefore, you'll make it harder for people to vote. Well, the evidence doesn't bear that out. The evidence from cities and the state of Maine, where ranked choice voting has been implemented, shows that there's not an impact on turnout, and voters do really both like the opportunity to express their full range of preference, and they do it. They do go through and rank. But I think most fundamentally is the point that you don't have to. You can just vote for your favorite candidate just like you do today, and you're no worse off under this system. That's the strongest response to that piece of criticism that we get. But that is always the number one concern, is whether or not voters are smart enough to handle it. Frankly, it's a little frustrating that voters are being considered in that, right? Let's give voters a little bit more credit. I think they know how to do the research. They have tools available to them from nonpartisan sources like the League. And if they had the ability to have their full preference count and matter, how empowering would that be, right? It makes it a very different decision on whether or not you want to do your research before you go and vote, because you might have more options and more inter-party competition that makes it important that you do that research in advance of voting in a way that, again, can be very empowering to voters. But full disclosure, that's the number one piece of pushback that we get.
Can you, another question, can you tell us whether or not ranked choice voting is anticipated to affect the amount of money that's spent on elections?
Yeah, that's another question that we get from time to time. We don't generally think that there's a huge interaction between the amount of money spent in a ranked choice voting election versus a regular election, that it won't have a huge impact. There's a ton of money in our elections, and that's in many ways a separate problem. And that problem needs to be solved with a constitutional amendment. So often we talk about in the work that we're prioritizing at Democracy Found, that we're prioritizing changes that are both powerful in that they get at what is the root cause of the dysfunction that we're seeing, but also what's achievable. And so constitutional amendments, we've just put in the bucket of it's not achievable right now. It's too long-term. It's achievable in decades. But this final five is achievable in a number of years. So that's where we're going to focus. And putting more accountability back into our electoral system gives voters more power. It actually makes votes more powerful. The other argument that I'll say in response to what does it do around money is that it makes money a little bit less powerful in elections. Because right now, bear with me for this somewhat long argument, but right now, you all get this, money is very, very powerful because we know who's going to win. So people can put money into elections, special interests in particular, can put money into elections. And already, as we said, in 80% of congressional races, the race is decided in the primary and you know who's going to be elected. So there's a high return on investment of money because it's very clear who the winner is going to be. So in an election where you have more competition into the general election and you have more focus on issues and you have not such a predictable result of elections, it makes votes relatively more powerful in this calculus of money being powerful versus votes being powerful. So again, importantly, changing the system to make it more accountable and competitive will make money less of a predictable return for special interests in the system. So we believe there might be some ancillary benefits to having final five voting when it comes to the concerns around money in politics, but it's not the leading factor for why we're focusing on final five voting. It's one of those benefits that we think will come kind of as a consequence of this change.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, another question, comment. Can you share more examples of cities and states that have adopted the ranked choice voting? You mentioned that the impact has been in a shortened time frame. More examples I think would be helpful, so if people wanted to read more about them, they could.
Absolutely. So our neighbors just across the river in Minneapolis and St. Paul have been using ranked choice voting in their municipal elections for about a decade now. So that's one of the longest standing experiments in the place where we have a lot of data on how the ranked choice voting ballot and instant runoff component of this works, again, at the municipal level. So different than what we're proposing, but still insightful. The other place where the change has happened more recently is in the state of Maine. So Maine has implemented ranked choice voting, again, the instant runoff component, for both their primaries and their general elections. They did that in 2018, so they've used it for 2 election cycles now in 2018 and 2020, with great results to show for it in terms of voter satisfaction with the system and voter understanding of the system. The other thing that I'll say is that the nonpartisan primary part of this, the top 5 primary that we're talking about, has not been implemented, but you might be familiar with the top 2 primary. So California and Washington State have implemented a top 2 primary system. We are trying to improve on that model by creating a healthier degree of competition by implementing a top 5 primary with instant runoffs in the general, for many reasons that we can get into if people are interested. But basically what we've tried to do is learn from these various state experiments in improving election systems and propose a system that we believe solves for some of the weaknesses of other systems and focuses on that end objective that we want, which is healthy competition and accountability in governing and results. Most recently, the state of Alaska, through ballot initiative, passed this combination of an open primary and an instant runoff in the general election this November. So Alaska will be the first state in 2022 to use the combined reform package that we're talking about in their elections in 2022. I would say we're already starting to see, when it comes to Alaska, some of the fruits of that labor when you look at how Senator Murkowski is acting right now. Now, Senator Lisa Murkowski has always been a rather independent senator from the state of Alaska because that's what Alaskans want. She's already battled the party primary and won as a write-in, even when the system was different. So she is a veteran of trying to make these changes, but ultimately watching the behavior and the freedom that she has in governing, I think makes a strong case for this combination of both fixing our partisan primaries and using instant runoffs in the general election.
Excellent. Okay, another question. There are a lot of complaints that ranked choice voting essentially kills those votes where the voter only picked one candidate. What's the argument against that perspective of wasted votes, so to speak?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the simplest response is that that's how it currently works. So people are no worse off. If your candidate is the first one off the ballot, basically through an instant runoff, then that vote would have been wasted in our current system, and it's wasted in the system of instant runoffs if you don't go through and put in a second or third place vote. So again, that voter is no worse off under this system than they would have been under the old system. They just have an added benefit under this system that if they want to signify who their second or third place votes are, they have the opportunity to have that vote counted. But again, they're not worse off under a ranked choice voting ballot or an instant runoff election than they are under our current electoral system.
And another question, and hopefully I can phrase this right. How would the national popular vote and ranked choice voting interface? Can you just go over that again?
It's a great question. And our legislation that we're drafting here in Wisconsin, I should say very clearly, is specific to federal elections for US Senate and US House of Representatives. We do not change our electoral system for president because it's a whole different can of worms. So let me share a little bit. Again, people know more about this than any of us ever thought we were going to after 2020 about the whole electoral college process and this idea of a national popular vote. But I will say that ranked choice voting has been used in both party primaries for presidential elections this year. There are a handful of states that used ranked choice voting. During a pandemic, there was a real, there's a strong case to be made for using ranked choice voting in states that had traditionally caucused and couldn't do that in person. So it was a really fantastic opportunity for experimentation and implementation in a really fast-tracked way to respond to the circumstances of 2020. So we continue to learn from that experiment. And Maine has implemented ranked choice voting for president because they are already one of the only 2 states in the country that proportionally allocate their electoral college votes. So they can use ranked choice voting to help proportionally allocate those electoral college votes for their state based on the ranked choice voting results. So again, it's like a whole new thing to figure out how each state runs their presidential nominating and electoral process slightly differently. And in Wisconsin, it's a whole different set of statutes than our statutes around our partisan primaries and general elections for other federal elections. So we are not starting there because it's just a little bit too complicated for our first attempt to stay in the realm of powerful and achievable. So, but it is possible that there could be a really powerful interplay between basically the electoral college allocations, popular vote conversations, and ranked choice voting. And other groups are working on that. It's just not something we're working on at Democracy Found in Wisconsin.
Thanks. Here's a question. So from your perspective, what do you think happens then to our political party structure?
Yeah, it's a good question, and is one of the pieces of pushback we receive from people who are in the political party structure. And it's where there is some skepticism because there would need to be adaptation. So political parties know how to run elections right now, right? They are very well versed in how elections work. So any sort of change is always difficult. Change is difficult in any sector. So it is something that political parties and particularly those that run elections for political parties and those in leadership in political parties have some skepticism about these changes because they would need to adapt to this system. Now, we believe they would adapt, and there's still incredible value to having a party's backing, even through a top 5 primary and a ranked choice voting general, because parties have infrastructure, they have money, they have a lot of resources that they can then target to whoever they decide to endorse. The interesting thing for parties is that they in some ways have, you could argue, a degree of more power under this system because they don't just have to automatically take whoever comes out of that party primary as their endorsed candidate. They can go through their own endorsement processes and pick the candidate that the Republican Party or the Democratic Party wants to endorse, and not just take whoever comes out of that super small turnout partisan primary. As again, you all know, party primaries are very, very low turnout elections. And right now, what that means is that whoever wins them can sometimes win with 10, 15% of the vote. And once they've won that party primary with those small amounts of votes, they're going to win the general election because of how districts are structured and the way that people live in geographically segregated areas with people who tend to agree with them in our current 2-party system and not having any inter-party competition in the general election. So parties will adapt. They always do. And I think they will adapt under this system, but it will be different.
And then there's a last question and an easy one for you. Can you give the date and time again of your presentation for Dane County again?
Yes, it should be easy. I'm sure Mary's got it even more quickly. I believe it's on the 25th, and it's in the evening. So I believe it's like the 25th in the evening. Yes, it's the 25th, and I want to say it's at 5:30 or 6, but Mary will correct me if I'm wrong later.
Well, and I think I'm going to turn it over to Mary in just a second for her conclusion and thank you comments. But I think that Nora will also put it in our newsletter so that folks will be able to see it in our newsletter, and we'll put it on our calendar on our website as well. So,
Perfect.
so thank you so much. That ends our questions. I'm going to go ahead and spotlight Mary for her closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Sarah, Ellen, and Robin. Um, yes, you're right. It's the 25th at 5:30. And registration's required, and it has already been in our newsletter and it's on our calendar on the website, I believe. And I encourage people to sign up and for a lively question and answer. So this past year showed us that our election system is vulnerable and in need of some repair. So again, if you're interested in learning more about ranked choice voting, um, join Sarah on January 25th at 5:30. Our news update is an excellent way to keep up to date with any events around both the league and the community. In fact, I am going to share right now some of the things that are happening in, let's see, I got to get rid of this. There we go. Around the area in the next month or in this month. So in Dane County, they are going to be celebrating a centennial um, event that was canceled last year. So this is with Carolyn Jefferson Jenkins, and she who is the first League of Women Voters president of African descent. And she is going to be speaking on finishing the fight now. Again, this is open to everybody now because of the virtual, because it's going to be virtual. It is not going to um, be recorded though. So if you are interested, this is something that you're going to have to attend live. Um, Again, that information will be available on our website. Um, with what has been happening, the DEI webinar on nonpartisan and DEI policies intersecting um, will can give you a better understanding of what the league is doing um, to to help with some of the divide. January 22nd is building a better democracy through civic education. Again, another webinar that you need to register for. And of course, then we have our book club, Prisoners of Geography, the 10 maps that tell you everything you want to know about global politics.
Hey, Mary,
Yes.
we just got a correction that that Dane County Forum is on Wednesday, January 27th at 5:30 p.m., not on the 25th. So just to correct what we had said before, Wednesday the 27th at 5:30 is the Dane County Forum.
Okay. Okay. All right. It's funny because it keeps popping up as the 25th. All right. So it's the 27th. Thank you. All right. So thank you everybody for attending today's webinar on Democracy Found, Nonpartisan Political Innovation in Wisconsin. If you have any further questions or comments, please send them to our Gmail account, which is lwvlawi@gmail.com. Please check out our website along with our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram accounts. Finally, stay well, stay involved. Happy 2021. Don't forget to complete your membership survey. And goodbye. See you in February for a look at women's health legislation in Wisconsin. Thank you for sharing with us today.